born with special needs, would you like to attend an inclusive school in which you would learn alongside your non-disabled peers or talk with them at lunch? Or would you rather be kept separate from them in a special education classroom, an isolated setting with a different curriculum? This theme of isolation versus integration does not just apply to educational settings. In Vanishing Voices, Russ Reimer describes how the last member of a tribe remains in solitude because he cannot converse with anyone, leading to the extinction of a language, while languages which survive are integrated into world communication and commerce. On the other hand, Richard Power and Nicholas Howell demonstrates the downfalls of inclusion, as an isolated chestnut tree survives for many generations, while fungi easily spread and obliterate groups of chestnut trees on the East Coast. Although the term special needs encompasses various disabilities, experts are most concerned about inclusive education for students in primary schools in grades K through 6 with intellectual disabilities, in which children have limitations in 1, intellectual functioning, and 2, adaptive behavior. Did you know that approximately 6.5 million Americans have an intellectual disability? Inclusive education is a relatively new concept in the U.S. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 1990, also known as IDEA, mandated that all public schools give all disabled students a free and appropriate education. Primary public schools in the United States should continue to integrate students with intellectual disabilities into inclusive classrooms because integrated classrooms result in positive benefits for all students. First, students benefit academically from being in an inclusive classroom setting. After analyzing 46 students, a group of researchers concluded that included learners with Down syndrome versus matched peers in special education classrooms were at least 2 years advanced on expressive language and over 3 years advanced in general verbal skills. Advanced literary abilities fostered by an inclusive primary school environment can help disabled students develop the tool set needed to succeed in secondary and post-secondary education. In the future, these skills can allow students to read and better comprehend their textbooks, or even help them clearly communicate with their teachers. Now, do only disabled students benefit while being in an inclusive classroom? No. In fact, typical children who act as peer tutors for their intellectually disabled classmates benefit academically. The authors of Sabrina's story describe how peer reading caused him, a typical student who writes to disabled student Sabrina, to progress from reading picture books to chapter books throughout his 3rd grade year. The teacher saw that Tim was encouraged by Sabrina's excitement when he read to her, slowly growing his fluency and courage. When teachers implement specific inclusive strategies and take advantage of the range of abilities in a classroom, reading to one's disabled peers can foster educational curiosity in children and even push them to challenge themselves academically. So what are the other implications besides positive educational outcomes? Well, children with intellectual disabilities in general education classrooms demonstrate improved behavior. An ABC News video report documented a successful school initiative in which intellectually disabled students were able to play and eat lunch with their peers from general education classrooms every Wednesday. 1, forming interactional skills, and 2, displaying happiness. Instead of limiting interaction to a weekly event, inclusive classrooms would further increase appropriate behaviors because primary school children could communicate with their non-disabled peers 5 days a week in this setting. However, this video does not recognize that other students have negative experiences. For example, let's say that you are a 5th grader placed in a setting in which you were bullied for being different. Would you most likely stay well-behaved, keeping your mind clear of thoughts in a learning environment surrounded by bullies? In a magazine article that discusses the social downfalls for children with ADHD in interacting with their peers, the mother of a child with this learning disability relayed that, quote, "The more kids that push your son away, the more outrageous his behavior got." Including young children with disabilities in general education classrooms exposes them to the potential of being rejected due to their differences, which can result in further setbacks in contact. Now, put yourself into the shoes of a parent who just enrolled your non-disabled child into an inclusive school. would you be worried that your child's behavior would be negatively impacted? After studying various inclusive classrooms for 2 years and conducting interviews with parents and teachers, Staub and other researchers found that non-disabled learners do not pick up less desirable behaviors from students with special needs in the classroom. Despite frequent interactions with disabled students, primary inclusive settings do not foster setbacks in non-disabled students' context. However, the authors do acknowledge that the effects on non-disabled students in inclusive classrooms may not be entirely comprehensive due to limited prior research. In conclusion, inclusive classrooms yield academic benefits and behavioral development, which will prepare students for 1, their schooling, 2, their future careers, and 3, for the rest of their lives. Fears about the presence of intellectually disabled students in inclusive classrooms are often the result of ignorance. A poll administered by the American Federation of Teachers found that, quote, 78% of respondents think that disabled students would not benefit from inclusion. To change biases against inclusion, school administrators should write and distribute newsletters to members of school communities about inclusive education. By supplementing anecdotal evidence with academic research in the newsletter, parents of both disabled and non-disabled students could understand the benefits of inclusive education, and non-disabled students may even become more accepting of their peers. Although some may immediately throw away the letter upon receiving it, the passionate or concerned individuals who take the time to actually read the newsletter would not only learn about inclusion, but would maybe even become more open-minded about other segregation issues, such as gender or racial discrimination. Once prejudices are overcome, all students can benefit from being in an inclusive classroom. Thank you.
Alexa, how valid and reliable are the sources that you use, and how do you know?
So before writing my essay, I had a research document where I would copy and paste all of my research into that I found. And so I made sure to choose the best pieces of evidence for each perspective, focusing on like which evidence was the most reliable. And so I made sure to incorporate like scholarly reviewed work and studies into my essay and other well-known websites such as NPR or The Guardian. So for example, I included Dr. Cavall's research reviewed by the Iowa Academy of Education to support the positive behavioral conclusions. But I also wanted to include a variety of work from different tier sources to make my argument more well-rounded. So for example, I wanted to use a tier 3 source in my essay, which included the perspective of a student named Mark, who was actually participated in a special education classroom, and he actually noticed the downfalls of, like the academic downfalls of him actually being in that classroom. And so on the top of the website, it actually said that it was a nonprofit organization, so that's how I concluded that it was somewhat reputable, because the author wasn't using that source to make financial gain. And yeah. Oh, sorry, and then there was also one other source that I thought that didn't work, so I found a very good article on, or not an article, but a comment on Yahoo Answers, which basically was, Yahoo Answers is a very unreputable source, but it did include a good perspective on it, but I made sure not to include it because we don't know who actually wrote it.
And how did you use the conclusions and questions of others to advance your own research?
So I previously talked to a girl who did the AP Capstone Seminar project last year, and she completed a similar project to mine, which she researched the technological impacts on students with autism. And so I talked to her about like how I should narrow down my research question, and I asked for her for like what advice I should have to, I guess, like start my research. And so she directed me to find like general knowledge about the topic before I started to delve in and to focus on each individual perspective. And so while I did this, I found information on websites about like the policies in the United States, or like the different types of disabilities and stuff. And so So from her conclusion, after her completing this project, I was able to have like a base platform in which I was able to research more and gain a better understanding of my topic.
Great.